Hello everybody, it's Martin, it's a new year and this is the first video of 2026. It was a sunny day, which is a rare thing in January in 2026, so we decided to go to the seaside. I'll explain more further into the video, but we went to Thorpeness, which is in Suffolk, and we went there via Aldeburgh, which I will mispronounce throughout this video. Right, morning everybody. We're in Aldeburgh and there is a strange thing in the sky. I'm hoping you can hear me, it's terribly windy. There's a strange thing in the sky, but I thought we would take advantage of the strange thing in the sky. Largely because I saw on the BBC website earlier this week a news story about a place called Thorpeness, which is about 3 miles to the north of where we are now. Bit of a maudlin reason to come and see it, but I got sidetracked because I saw the BBC news story and I got sidetracked and I was looking into Thorpeness and it looks like a fascinating place. I think I probably called this video Losing Neverland, which might be a clue. I'll talk about it more when we get up to Thorpeness. But if you've ever seen the film Finding Neverland, you will know that there is a JM Barrie theme, and I'm assuming there'll be a JM Barrie theme too today. So I thought we would start down here in Aldeburgh, and we're hopefully going to go and find a nice cafe in a moment and have a coffee and a cake, and then we're going to take a walk up to Thorpeness, and I'll explain more when we get there, but there are a couple of reasons why we're going. For those of you of a similar disposition to myself, as I say, there's the car park. It was £5.50 to park all day, and that little plot there is a toilet. So as soon as you get here, you've got a toilet. It was free to use and it was open. And I think that yellow diamond, in fact, it says telephone cable. So I guess there's a telephone cable, goes all the way off over there somewhere towards Holland. Anyway, I'm going to go and find this cafe. So you find us now on Crag Path, walking towards let's say the centre, or certainly the busier area of Aldeburgh. Now, there are 3 roads running in parallel. This one is very much on the seafront, and it's a running theme, actually, of Aldeburgh and Thorpeness. Everything is really, really kind of close to the seafront. Unusually so, I think, compared to most seaside towns which have a boulevard or a boardwalk or something that you would walk along. But anyway, then you got the high street, which is the main road, and you can imagine that is the high street with the shops and the cafes. And then there's a tiny little road in between, which I assume is a kind of access road from days of yore. The further up the road you get, the more there is to see. There are kind of unexplained pieces of art on the side of the house. You've got this building on the right called South Lookout, which I assume was a lookout again in days of yore. And beside it is this table of remembrance, which was really charming. It's a kind of a random table just on the edge of the beach, as you can see, covered in pebbles, some of which have been written on, and there are Sharpies, pens on the table, and you are invited to contribute. So you find yourself a pebble that hasn't been written on, and you can write whatever you want on there. Some people have written messages of love and hope, some people have written messages of remembrance from loved ones who have passed, and some people just write anything plain old funny. Now then, this is Aldeburgh Museum, and you'll see it isn't the biggest museum in the world. We didn't go in, wasn't that we didn't have time, we just weren't particularly interested, if I was sounding a bit rude. But what fascinated me was the sundial. It sounds a bit daft, but I've never seen a sundial in action. And this one told the time, and it was spot on, and I found that really fascinating. I believe this is very much a local museum. It's all about the local history of Aldeburgh and this part of the coast. And again, it just doesn't interest me, but all the reviews on Google are incredibly positive. And then from there, we went back over to the kind of the coastal path. It was only 10 yards away. But the first thing we found was the lifeboat station, or so we thought. And you turn around and there's the lifeboat station. That's a real lifeboat station. It was a bit early. We didn't get to look inside. And then you get this little statue. It was a bit worn out. We didn't really see who this dog was or why he's wearing a brightly coloured scarf and so revered by the locals, but still very charming. And then we got sidetracked. We were going to head inland and find a coffee shop, but we'd heard about this, the Aldeburgh Scallop. It's a work of art by British artist Maggie Hambling, and it was a tribute, or their tribute, to Benjamin Britten. So I'm entirely quoting Wikipedia here, but this was unveiled in 2003, so 23 years, you would never know it. You would think that this is brand new. It's entirely designed to be used and appreciated, apparently. I was just sort of tapping the metal. I was amazed that it was really thick metal. Now, those words, I hear those voices that will not be drowned, are from Britain's opera Peter Grimes, apparently. Anyway, going back to the structure, I was surprised. It's really, really thick metal. It's really solid. And apparently, Maggie Hambling said that she wanted people to enjoy it, that she wanted people to climb on it and sit on it and go underneath. You'll see a view in a moment. I go and look underneath. She wants people to interact with it, and trust me, you're not going to break it. From here, we wanted to head up to Thorpeness, which was kind of the whole point of the day out. And we had a choice. We could either walk along the beach, but I wanted to come back along the beach. And what I actually wanted to do, behind the beach is quite a wide area of wetlands. And then behind the wetlands is a pathway. It's quite a long straight pathway, so I'm convinced that any long straight pathway these days is an old disused railway line. I've got no evidence of whether it is or not, but I was convinced it was. Anyway, we headed out in that general direction. There's a small residential road. You go a couple of 100 yards and then you take a right and you find yourself on this path. Now, this video again doesn't really do it justice. It was really busy, but not in a nasty way. It was lovely. Families and people walking their dogs and people generally enjoying the countryside. And this path, like I say, is about 2 miles between the two towns, and then you find yourself on the back end of Thorpeness. Which brings me on to the first reason of this kind of day out, and it was this JM Barrie link to Thorpeness. And you find yourself at the end of this path at the backside of the boating lake, which is kind of the central feature of the village of Thorpeness. And I thought that you could make your way to all the various islands, and each of these islands has got some kind of Peter Pan paraphernalia on there. And I thought that we could make our way between the islands and take photos of all these different things. And sadly, you can't. And I'll explain more about that later on in the video. But because we couldn't, we found ourselves at the back end. And you come out at the golf course. And if you walk past the golf course, you come to Thorpeness's other two sort of biggest features. And it's this house in the clouds and the windmill. So the house in the clouds used to be a water tower, I understand, and some entrepreneurial person decided to turn it into this residence. And I understand, I mean, it looks like there are windows all the way up, but the house itself sits atop the tower. You can see it for miles, so I can only assume the views from the house go on for miles as well. And you've got these rather lovely houses all sort of centred around the boating lake. And then you've got the windmill, which I believe is original. It's not just there as a bit of paraphernalia. It is an original windmill. I'd assume it doesn't work anymore, but it's certainly really nice to look at. It's a funny thing that all the way walking into the village, you could see the house in the clouds and the windmill poking up above the trees, and you thought, God, that's going to be impressive. When you get there, for some reason, I don't know why, but it was less impressive. I don't know what it was, but it just wasn't as high as you imagined it was going to be. That Sizewell B just on the horizon there, which I thought was quite interesting. And then the drone carries on looking around, so you can see how close we are to the coast, and then there is the boating lake. Right, we've got a little update. This isn't quite going as I'd planned, but that's largely because when I looked on the map, you can get around, I'll show you where we've been, but you can get around all these different islands, and it turns out you can't. So if you are coming to visit, we are now in Thorpeness, so we've gone up the path and we're now in Thorpeness. We took, as I said earlier, the path that goes up the backside of the wetlands, and I thought that there were little pathways through all the different islands, which I'll show you in a moment. But unfortunately, there aren't, so we took the back way round. So I'll turn the camera around and I'll show you where we are. Now this is Mears Lake. Now the whole village, if I sort of pan around, the whole village was a project by a chap whose name I shall put up because obviously I've forgotten it. But it was a little kind of utopian project like Bourneville, and this was wetlands, and he kind of, sounds a bit daft, but from what I understand, he drained the wetlands and then he filled them in to be a boating lake. And if you can see there, I don't know if you can see that crocodile, so he built loads of islands within the boating lake. And he happened to be friends with JM Barrie, so he decided to make all the islands themed for Peter Pan. So we've got a crocodile, there's Wendy's Island, there's Hook's Island, there's a number of different islands, and they're all themed. Now when you look on Google, loads of people have had their photos taken on these islands, and as I say, I thought that we could walk to them, but you can't. Hello, Mr. Swan. So I think from March onwards there are boats that you can hire from that little shack there, and you can go out, so you can row to the islands and you can take your pictures from the various things. You can take your picture in Wendy's house and whatnot. But at this time of year, January, you can't hire a boat, so you can't do it. There's the house in the clouds. I think you can just about see the windmill there. After lunch, we decided we'd investigate the second reason for going to Thorpeness, which was this BBC News story that I'd seen earlier in the week. Sounds a bit morbid, really, but very similar to further up the coast. There seemed to be a lot of coastal erosion, and with all these houses right on the coast, the news story was that a woman had been asked to move out of her home and they were having to demolish it. Now, strangely, we didn't see any evidence of this. I thought we would go and have a walk along and just see how bad it was, like people are going to Hemsby and walking along the cliff to see the cliffs falling away and all the houses hanging over the edge of the cliff. So I just wondered how bad it was. But all we found were all these gorgeous houses, and they really are slap bang on the beach. They're all looking over the sea. It must be a fantastic place to live. But we didn't see any sign of anybody in trouble or distress or any houses showing any signs. There were even houses being built, which suggests to me that nobody's that worried about losing their home. You wouldn't be building a new house if you thought that the sea was encroaching on where you were building it. Now, you can't really get a sign of the wind. I didn't do much voice to camera for whatever reason, so you can't really get a sense of just how windy it was. And I hope it comes out on camera here. The wind was really whipping up a mist or a spray coming off of the sea, but we decided to walk back along the beach anyway. And then we found ourselves back in Aldeburgh in the sort of mid-afternoon. And for a surprise day out, because it was sunny, we'd had such a cracking day, we decided it was far too early to leave and go home. You can see here the car park was busy, but it wasn't full. I think most people were actually parking in town. There was enough space to park along the high street. Most people were parking in town. But we decided that we'd walk further out of town towards this Martello Tower, which Wikipedia tells me is the last in a line of them along the east coast of England, designed to keep Napoleon out. Little did they know, of course, in 200 or 300 years' time that there would be this thing called the internet, and on the internet there were sites like Airbnb that would allow normal people to go and holiday in them throughout the summer. And you kind of felt a little bit naughty going for a bit of a snoop. There were clearly people staying there. I didn't see anybody else around. I think that was their cars. But it wasn't like you were spying on them, because you couldn't see them and they certainly couldn't see us. And it really is secluded. You can see behind it there is the River Alde, which goes down, as you can see there, and it eventually comes out into the sea, the mouth of the River Alde. And then on this side is the sea, so it must be fantastic. Even with those thick walls, you must be able to hear the sea at night, and probably nothing else. By now it was getting really chilly, it was getting dark, it was getting late, and we were getting hungry, so we thought we'd walk back to the car and decide what we were going to do for dinner. So we decided we would head into Felixstowe. It was about an hour away, we didn't know anything about it, and we headed first to the Lookout Cafe. And it's called the Lookout Cafe because it sits right beside the port of Felixstowe, and you can go down and you can have meals or coffee and cake or whatever and just sit and watch the world go by, the world being the world of cargo ships. And you get phenomenal views of these boats being loaded up, and you realise that the cranes are lifting entire lorries and they look like tiny little specks. And from there we went back to the proper seafront and we had the best fish and chips before we headed home. It really was a fantastic day. I can't recommend Felixstowe enough. We were there an hour and we really want to go back. So Hopefully that will be another video in the future. So thank you for watching, really appreciate it, and I'll be back soon.